Yeah, there was a Game Informer interview about Marvel 2, and we talked about this, that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 cabinet, which has all the other games on it, right, could potentially be, as described, right, by Arcade 1-Up themselves, can be described as the last dance of Marvel vs. Capcom. Yeah, do you want information? And it's not, that's potentially not great news, you know? And it leads me to some interesting conclusions in my head. The last, like, shindig of Marvel and Capcom working together might actually be this Marvel vs. Capcom 2 cabinet. That's interesting. So there's a Game Informer interview apparently about that shit. And I would like some information! Very much. Because that's like, I mean, it's good that it exists. It's not exactly what we all wanted. It would be much nicer for there to be an actual, you know, affordable for everybody package of the MVC series and a collection of some kind, but interesting, right? Interesting to say the least. I want to watch this really fast because this is directly related to Marvel 2. A lot of people, including Kenny, got the chance to go to EVO and essentially be a part of the event with Arcade 1-Up. They had like a room, I believe, that had a whole bunch of units or playables, or you can actually see what the heck the unit is like. Anyway, I want to see what this says specifically, but granted, like, even if it's coming from Arcade 1-Up guys, which have done a lot of great stuff in the past, it is an expensive big cabinet, and I'd imagine they're trying to sell you on it, so there's also that issue. Right? There's also the issue that, you know, well, maybe they're trying to make this a more appealing package, but then there was also some stuff that they can only make so many because of the license, and I'm like, that's interesting. So let's check this out.
My first EVO is definitely, you know, very memorable. It's been a great weekend, but the fun's not over. Today, we are headed to the stadium, the Mandalay Bay Stadium. We're eventually going to go there, but first, we're gonna go and check out a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 Arcade 1-Up cabinet, play it for ourselves in a hotel room that Arcade 1-Up has the machine in. So we're gonna go check that out. That was just announced this weekend. Yeah, so.
Yeah, the other thing I heard that was coming directly from the producers of the Arcade 1-Up machine is that they essentially have a limited amount of units they can make, and that does happen in licensing agreements, chat, because it is a classified, I believe, as a toy, right? When you essentially release merchandise as, of something that is not a digital product, a lot of the times it's written into the negotiations that you can only make so much of this. You can't just go make it forever, right? Continually craft it, continually create it, moving forward from this point onward. No, there's limitations to it. There's deals where that ends, you make like 10,000 units and that's it. There's usually a running stock of like, you make 5 grand of them or something, and that's about it. It's not as much that it's a luxury item, it's that it is a because of the licensing around it, and it is a toy, right? They can't just go make more of this old thing when there's new things that they would prefer you to play, and suddenly this older company is making an old thing. It's like, oh shit, that doesn't work out. So that's the businessing behind this shit. We got to talk about what this means for the future of Marvel vs. Capcom, and if it's leading down the path that I think it is.
We're gonna go do it.
Yep, that's the old panel art, all right. The side art is not. The side art is actually much closer to the PlayStation 2 box art. Anybody remember that? I think Hulk and Spider-Man were on it.
All right, want to see what games are on here? Yeah. So we have Marvel 2, Marvel vs. Capcom, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, X-Men vs. Street Fighter.
And all of these are online, which is pretty crazy.
Marvel Superheroes.
Oh, they used TU4AR for the menu theme. That's
X-Men
good.
Children of the Atom and X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. Oh, and War of the Gems. There's a lot of games on here, and it's like it's basically the whole Marvel catalog from pre-Marvel 2, so that's pretty good. Yeah.
Well, I think I know what people want to see first.
Mutant Apocalypse.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah,
X-Men Mutant Apocalypse.
I was always a big Sans.
By the way, I would recommend that if anybody is looking at these machines and are interested, if you are over 6 feet tall, if you're eclipsing the heavens like some of us at 6'2" to 6'3" to 6'4", get a stool. You need a stool, because if you our arcade machines already naturally are really tall for a lot of us, even old school gigantic JAMA cabinets. And because I have several, yeah, like I require stools even for those machines, or else I have to take a very wide ass stance. So if you guys have not had an arcade 1-up machine before, they're close in size, but not nearly as large and big. Get a stool for God's sake. If they come with stools, official stools, cool. That's great. But just go to like get a barcade stool, something like that. Get a stool sample. Good call.
San guy. So I'm gonna go with San. Everyone has their problematic faves.
So every character is unlocked at the start. They obviously hacked and this is, but I don't believe this is the Naomi version. I'm sorry, this is the
How's it feel?
That feels great.
Dreamcast version of the game. It is the Naomi version.
Yeah.
From 3 months ago?
And it's also not in widescreen,
play on
right? It's different than the older one, the 360 version.
PS2 controller though.
It's custom arcade ROM. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and the widescreen was always weird in Marvel 2. Even in the 360 PS3 version, it had some graphical bugs.
On this one, and this is his baby. This is the 3/4 representation of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 arcade cabinet. It'll retail for $5.99.
So here's the funny thing about this whole situation, chat. This is John, and I remember John because I've talked to him a few times, and I remember him back from Marvel 3 and at E3. And he was essentially the dude that worked at Capcom for a ridiculously long period of time, until there was a pretty huge like outing at Capcom around 2017, 2018, where a lot of people that ran the fighting game division like all left. But anyway, this was the licensing guy. This was the guy that essentially made all the licensing work for the entirety of the Versus series. So Marvel 2, outside projects like Street Fighter Cross Tekken, from what I understand, and things that all line up with anything that is properties outside of Capcom. So he mostly was the person that put that stuff together, that actually like had the ability and the contacts to make that happen. And what's funny is that he's essentially still doing it now, not even working at Capcom anymore, and still has, you know, still is able to actually make this happen, which is interesting.
Pre-orders are up September 8th. Also, we were talking about Wi-Fi online play. It also has Ethernet, probably the best way to be able to play this. And the great thing is this is cross-play compatible with our previous Marvel cabs.
So that's awesome, right? That didn't need... I don't know, does anybody know if Arcade 1-Up has other cabinets that actually cross-play? Does anybody know if that even exists? Because there's the Big Blue, for example, is another big Capcom fighting cabinet that has a whole bunch of games on it that is playable online, but I don't know if they are crossplay with anything. The biggest difference is that there's 2 other big MVC cabinets that these guys make, and it's the Marvel vs. Capcom 1 cabinet and the X-Men vs. Street Fighter cabinet. And those have like a ton of classic versus games all online, and they play with each other. So now this one's going to also play with those, and that was a very popular run. Like a lot of people bought those. You doubt anybody's online? You'd be shocked, right? Not like console numbers or anything, but even like 6 months after, Kenny and Steve would show up and then turn my machine on pre-stream, and within seconds, they'd be fighting people. I don't know what it's like now, because my machine's not even plugged in. I literally had to swap a cable for my Killer Instinct cab. But you'd be shocked how many people are just like, leave their machine on and just search for matches in arcade mode, and all of a sudden, you pop up and get a game. And even those games are relatively, niche. The old Versus series like X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel 1 and stuff like that, they're kind of niche versions of Marvel vs. Capcom games. MVC2 is clearly the most popular one. So if we're talking about like online player base, are you actually going to have people to play with? I mean, this is like the best chance, I guess. It's still not as big as if it was on console, obviously, but at least it's good that the people that have the old machines can still play with you.
So they share the same lobbies. Yeah, so
That's really neat.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it online for all the games that would have multiplayer?
That is correct, and a lot.
And they all have rollback netcode. The bit that I played of them and the guys have played, it runs pretty good.
Until we released it, Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter was ever re-released, and probably even X-Men.
It's expensive. No, it is.
But yeah, so
not cheap.
It has.
I mean, how much did the MVC1 cabinet cost? Wasn't it around the same price? Do these things arrive in giant boxes? Yes. They arrive in what is like a giant IKEA box. You've probably seen them in Walmart and stuff like that. The MVC1 machine launched at $500. Gotcha. And this has substantially different hardware in it because Marvel 2 takes more horsepower to run than those old 2D games. So, anyway, interesting.
A lot of marquee that you all remember from the past. We're basically using the CE control panel because back in the day, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was maybe the expansion arcade pack. So they used to give like a sticker, a marquee, and then people kept using the old CE things. You have a coin door. It's not operational, but it looks really nice.
They added those only recently, right?
To get it a little taller. You know, it's not too heavy, so you can basically move it around. You can have multiple arcade one-ups in your house, and so this is our representation.
Now, these cabinets eventually go on sale. Yeah, sometimes you can pick up old arcade one-up cabinets from like Walmart, like old Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat cabinets, going all the way as low as like $100 to $150. But that's years down the line, right? Like several years down the line. They launch at like a high premium, like $400 to $500, but eventually they go on sale, and you just have to find the right spot at the right time. You can be at a Best Buy at the right time, be at a Walmart at the right time, and you can pick one up. The issue is those old ones, they made a ton of them, right? They made a ton of the Street Fighter cabinets, and they made a ton of the Mortal Kombat cabinets and stuff. You'd be pretty hard pressed to get lucky and find an MVC machine. Maybe you could, right? You might find some, out there. You can only find the stupid Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one. Yeah, right. Like and that's the challenge. Is that I wonder if they specifically talk about like the fact that this is a limited run, where a lot of the pre-orders are going to scoop up like a whole bunch of machines that they're planning to make.
Presentation of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. The side art is based on the console version art. So, yeah, we're really proud of this, and it's been a labor of love. It's been since 2009 since there's been a re-release of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and probably it was like I think 2013 when it was taken down from stores when Capcom and Marvel, kind of went their ways a little bit, but
so how has it been, I guess, getting this up and running? You're still working with Marvel, you're working with Capcom, like what's the how did that all come together for this?
It's a long time coming, right? I was in licensing hiatus for a while, right? And I think almost a year ago today, Maximilian dude, he had the hashtag free Marvel, free MVC2, and it just caught on fire. Millions of views on multiple videos, and the fans really wanted this game back. It's because it's likely considered probably one of the greatest fighting games ever created. 56 characters. It's nuts. And it's also Marvel and Capcom.
Oh God, the influence.
Once that MVC2 free MVC2 campaign started gaining momentum, it did get the attention of Capcom and Marvel, and so we were lucky enough to bring both parties together to re-release this one last time.
Well, that just seems like Arcade 1-Up saw an opportunity, right? That just feels like, this Max guy sounds like a loser. Who's that asshole? Who's this asshole? And that was kind of the idea, right? And I'm not saying this was the specific goal of creating that hashtag, creating that campaign, bringing everybody together that loves Marvel 2. The goal was to get it like in some way, right? Just to get Marvel and Capcom to at least perk their fucking ears in a direction that this is worth money to you guys, because a lot of people would be willing to buy this. In my mind, obviously, we wanted a console version in some way. Like, obviously, we wanted like a $30 to $40 console version that has a console version available in some way in the future. But it was pretty clear that Arcade 1-Up already had a relationship with Marvel and Capcom from the previous cabinets. And they just swooped in, right? They're just like, hey, you know, a lot of people are talking about this shit. You know, there's people making posters on wrestling events. There's a billion pieces of fan art and stuff like that. So if this is like a result of that, that's badass, right? That's cool that there's something. The hope is that there's something, you know, also to accompany it in the future, right? Maybe this is like the appetizer of what could possibly be down the line in some way. And that's where I'm kind of curious, is based on some of the stuff they're saying, that so they managed to put this all together in a year. I mean, considering how focused of an environment they have, they don't have to deal with multiple pieces of hardware like console, right? They put it together in like a year and figured out the licensing. The biggest challenge they probably had was getting the internal parts for Dreamcast to actually make it work, right? So, I mean, I'm assuming that it might have likely been in production anyway, but at the same time, you know, having it be a part of like, yeah, there's a lot of people screaming for this game. There's just right place, right time type of shit. So, I mean, the game is already made, right? No emulation. No, you're essentially having to emulate the game in a complete new way. And Justin, I think, has been talking about how he is like a tester on this thing, helping them, you know, essentially test a bunch of issues on the game. So, no, that is not an easy process by any means. You think it would be? It's not.
This is still early version, so a lot of footage you might see a little bit lag here and there. Justin won't promise us to fix all of it, so don't worry about it. Or else,
yeah, Justin's been like testing a bunch of stuff. That's what I heard from him, that he's like helping them try to get it as smooth to the previous versions, much less the arcade version, as possible.
Killed by the community if this doesn't turn out right. Right, his reputation's on the line for sure. A lot of pressure, but it is a lot of pressure because this is a beloved game.
Oh God, tell me there's more.
We're recording.
Okay. Hey everybody, we are here in an undisclosed location in Los Angeles. We are in a very nice hotel suite.
Start over.
Okay.
Las Vegas.
What'd I say?
Los Angeles.
Oh my God. I've got LA on the brain.
Oh Jesus, that's not Marvel stuff. The biggest talking point that I wanted to chat about is this Last Dance sort of thing. Yeah, so the quote is this, right? Once the free Marvel 2 campaign started gaining momentum, it did get the attention of Capcom and Marvel, so we were lucky enough to bring both parties together to release this one last time. Yeah, Last Dance, like Jordan, right? And that was the term I kept hearing thrown around a bit, where it's like, you know, we got Capcom and Marvel again for one last time. And that leads my brain down several different directions, where it's like, oh, the closest we were able to get was essentially a toy licensing thing, because that relationship might be completely soured, right? It's unfortunately like that's good that this exists, that there was something, but that's giving me the impression like, uh-oh. Jordan came back a few times. That's true, right? That's true. At the same time, this could be marketing, right? Just the fact that, you know, get our cabinet. It's the last time you'll ever see this. That I get it. That could definitely be a thing. But at the same time, it's like, wow, could this be like the last time, one of the last times we actually see Marvel and Capcom working together on shit? The concern is there because MVCI fucked shit up, Chad. You have to understand, like, what happened with that game might have completely ruined the franchise's possibility from that point forward. It did some unfortunate damage in between the relationship. And here's the thing. The people that were there before to essentially be the liaison and the creative, like, the business and creative throughput between each company, those people are gone. Like, they're just not there anymore. Games don't make themselves. And I have to keep reminding people this. Games do not make themselves. You need people to know people. You need people that want to work with other people again to make something dope, right? That has to exist. That might be completely gone. And it's pretty clear that, like, possibly, like, at least the folks at Arcade 1-Up are there to still establish that relationship in some way with, like, licensed toy stuff. I mean, this might be, unfortunately, like a bearer of actual bad news, that what happened between Marvel Games and Capcom might not fucking be really around anymore. Like, that relationship might not exist. The thing is, I remember the last time I was really excited that Marvel and Capcom might be in cahoots again was the Marvel Superheroes cabinet, right? Where it was the fact that, wait a minute, this is technically a Marvel versus Capcom game. Marvel Superheroes, you guys are like working together again? to find out that actually it was the same, you know, licensing people. It was like John that switched over to Arcade 1UP that was essentially responsible for all of this stuff. Essentially like the one responsible for like putting this shit together. I think there's a lot of questions there, right? Much less Marvel and Capcom might be not in cahoots with anybody anymore. That relationship just might not exist until somebody really tries to make it exist again in the same way that, you know, Capcom did way back in the day. That or Marvel just has like other plans, you know? We don't know. But it is interesting to me. There has been a substantial amount of rumors for the past 2 years of certain fighting game companies potentially with licensing of like Marvel stuff. There has been some rumors. And there's also, yeah, stuff recently that like Arc System Works is even looking into overseas properties. Like, we're looking to the West to make a fighting game. And I'm like, ha! There has definitely been some stuff over the past couple of years that leads us into a direction of, I wonder if the relationship of Marvel and Capcom could even exist if something like that is happening. Likely not, right? There's a very low likelihood that that shit could even be a thing. Because if one company has like all the licensing to it and spent all that money on licensing, why the hell would they split it off with another company? If this all does end up being true, it's actually not a great thing for the future of Marvel versus Capcom as a franchise, which affects me, right? That officially like affects me in some way, because this is actually my favorite fighting game series of all time. It is. The Marvel versus Capcom series is my favorite of all fighting games there is, just number one. And what happened to Marvel Infinite clearly hurt. That shit was 5+ years ago now, or about to be 5 years ago now, and that shit clearly hurt and burned a lot of people, as it fucking should have, right? The game was not what people wanted. So to think that this might be like the final swan song, well, it's nice at least Marvel 2 exists in some way, you know? It would have been even better if they can just resurrect it from the PS3 library or Xbox 360 and just let people have that shit. Just let people be able to play that shit on modern consoles or something like that. But it feels like we're kind of going back to 2013, 2014. It feels like we're going back there, where suddenly Marvel and Capcom are not in cahoots. We're not selling the games anymore. At least it isn't the fact that you can't even, at least we're not in a situation where like 2013, where you can't even buy Marvel 3 anymore. Like, you can't even buy MVCI. You couldn't even purchase any of the classic Marvel vs. Capcom games. That happened, right? That was about like a little bit over 10 years ago. That happened. They removed everything from digital stores. You have to go buy pre-owned copies of Ultimate Marvel 3 if you wanted it. And then shit did change, right? And over time, shit could change with this. There could be an absolute momentum shift for the MVC series. But as of right now, I mean, if we're hearing things the way they're being explained, it sort of feels like at the moment, this is like sort of the coup de grace of the Marvel vs. Capcom series. That at least Arcade 1UP was able to jump in and do something, realize that, like, essentially do what I was screaming at devs. I was kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna use Twitter. I'm gonna be like, hey, do something with this. Look how many people give a shit. Look at all of them. And yeah, like everyone responded. Look how many people give a shit. And the good news is that something happened, right? At least as we know right now, something happened. It's a $600 something, but at least it's something, because it could be fucking nothing. Like, it could just be like, everybody shut up. Nobody talk about it. Nobody mentioned anything. You can't use the word Marvel versus Capcom or else you're essentially blacklisted, right? There could be a moment like that. It does exist in some way. It isn't the most perfect scenario, but at least there's something. And as of right now, I'm a little not so optimistic about like the future of the MVC series. I think it's going to be up to us and up to everybody that loves Marvel vs. Capcom classic games to essentially just keep them alive in some way, which is unfortunate because it's the original Dream Fighter. There is, however, in my personal opinion, another long-lost Capcom versus franchise that has a much higher likelihood of existing in some way in the modern age because of a gigantic shift in relationship, like in essentially who is working with each other relationship-wise between companies. And yeah, that's Capcom and SNK. Those guys seem to be really, really chill with each other right now. And they're cheering each other on for their games to do well. It's actually pretty sick. And even we saw some cool collaboration stuff happening at EVO. And I don't think that means nothing. I really don't. I don't think that those posters and those collab things are just meaningless and just cool, I think it means something. So I don't think it's a bad thing. Is this weird? That I don't think NBC2 doesn't sound free at all after all this? Well, I mean, by the technical definition, they're right. You know, you guys did it. It's not free to everybody because it costs a lot of money. It is a very high premium ass game. But at the same time, they were able to figure out the licensing jail that it was in to get it released in some way. It's on bail. It's on a $600 bail. That's the best way to describing it. So I have to give them at least that credit. They did figure it the fuck out, which was almost an impossibility, it feels like.